If Michelangelo Were to Be Born Again by Li Jiatong, translated by Nicholas Koss. After I became the president of Providence University, I often was not able to return home for supper, so I frequently went to my students' home to bum a supper. And the one most often bothered by me was Wang Jiazheng. There were many reasons why I liked to go to his house for supper. First of all, his wife was an excellent cook. Then, he was good at photography, so each time I went, I would inevitably see his latest work. Finally, he had a smart, lovable son. Wang worked at a mobile phone company and often had to go abroad to sign roaming contracts with foreign mobile phone companies. After the contract was signed, each time he would go sightseeing to a famous landmark or some special scenery. Because his skill at photography was extraordinary, his photographs were worth putting on exhibition. Every time I went to his home, I would enjoy his latest photographs. It was obvious to me that Wang was an aesthete. All of his photographs were exceptionally beautiful, no matter whether a portrait or scenery, and gave me a kind of feeling that there was nothing not beautiful in his photographs. For example, in his portraits, it seemed that there were never elderly people with gray hair or missing teeth. Wang Jiazheng had a special way for the education of his son. He wanted his son to be sufficiently imaginative, so he never gave him too many of the toys that were a mere copy of real-life objects. He often encouraged his son to pick an object at random and then imagine it to be something special. Sometimes I saw his son playing with a stick, but he insisted that it was a spaceship. He said that in the future, spaceships would be just like this. The Wang son, carrying the family dog, often sought me out. He would tell me that the little dog was not in a good mood today, or that it had fought with the neighbor's dog. From my perspective, however, the dog's expression was always the same. The son's remarks were all the result of the day-in, day-out workings of his wild imagination. Wang, however, was not concerned about his son's imagination. In fact, he often talked nonsense with his son, thinking that in this way his son would have a fertile imagination. Little Wang was in the first grade. He walked to and from school each day. Safety was no problem in Taichung County, so the majority of elementary school students went to school in this way. Every day, little Wang walked back and forth to school, and it enriched his conversation. Each time we had supper together, we would always hear the son's report on what he had seen. But we were never sure if it was true or not, for we all knew that some of it came from his imagination. Little Wang often referred to a Grandpa Zhang, who seemed to be a kind old man who liked kids and played with them. Little Wang was very happy whenever he mentioned Grandpa Zhang, but recently he became very serious when he referred to him because he said, "Grandpa Zhang is sick." One day at supper, little Wang suddenly asked his mother, "Mommy, are you able to pray?" Mrs. Wang said that she was, so her son very seriously asked her to pray for Grandpa Zhang because his illness had become extremely serious. That evening, after the son had gone to bed, I was talking with Jia Zheng in the living room and suddenly heard Mrs. Wang's sharp scream. Little Wang was missing. We discovered that he had gotten out from the second floor fully clothed. His blanket was also nowhere to be seen. Apparently, the boy had secretly put on his clothes, taken his blanket, and snuck away. Mrs. Wang was scared to death, but Jia Zheng was not too alarmed and asked me to help. We took their little dog with us, and it followed little Wang's usual way to school. We came to a small park that was deserted, but the dog immediately found little Wang. Little Wang was sound asleep on a stone table. Next to him was sleeping an old man. Even though he was also under a blanket, it was obvious that his clothes were old and worn. His face was old and tired. One look and we knew it was the Grandpa Zhang whom little Wang talked about so often. And Grandpa Zhang was indeed a vagrant. Jia Zheng asked me to carry little Wang back. Before I left, he was trying to figure out how to wake up Grandpa Zhang, but it seemed the old man couldn't be awakened. Through it all, little Wang was sound asleep. I took him home and then left. When Jia Zheng did not return, I knew that he was still looking after Grandpa Zhang. I was thinking that little Wang definitely had felt that Grandpa Zhang's illness was extremely serious. It was at that moment that he wanted to sleep with Grandpa Zhang. Jia Zheng and I had both thought that Grandpa Zhang was a character out of little Wang's imagination. We did not think that there really was such a person, and one who was a vagrant. Jia Zheng said that he had called an ambulance to take Grandpa Zhang to the emergency room. He never woke up and died the next day in the hospital. Jia Zheng never left Grandpa Zhang's side and contacted the neighborhood police station. The police told him that Grandpa Zhang was not all that clear in the head and had never spoken a word, so they never knew who he was or where he came from. A couple of times they had sent him to a shelter for the homeless, but he would always leave and spend the night in the park. The police never bothered him because he never hurt anyone. After a while, he would return to the police station and they would provide some clean clothes for him. Good-hearted people in the neighborhood always gave him something to eat. And so for many years, he lived like this in the village. The police said that the old vagrant liked little kids and that, oddly enough, the kids liked him. They never talked, but the old man seemed to be able to play some games that left those naughty kids very happy. It was clear that little Wang was one of the boys who developed a deep friendship with the old man. That he called him Mr. Zhang came completely from his imagination. Jia Zheng arranged for a funeral for Grandpa Zhang. Their teacher took little Wang and his playmates to the funeral, and they all very respectfully bowed before the coffin. For us adults, Grandpa Zhang was an old, poor vagrant, but for those children, he was a kind old man who loved them. Jia Zheng told me that the affair of Grandpa Zhang changed his thinking. He discovered that people pay too much attention to exterior beauty and overlook the goodness deep in one's soul. Princess Diana and Mother Teresa both died about the same time. That the media only paid attention to Princess Diana is a very good example. For adults, Grandpa Zhang was a vagrant, not worth any attention. But for children, he was a kind old man. It was the perspective of little Wang that caused Jia Zheng to look at things from a different angle. Afterwards, the photographs of Jia Zheng gradually began to change. Now, the focus of his camera was to capture old women and other people laboring under the harsh sunlight. One black and white photo was particularly inspiring. It showed a child and his grandmother playing a game. The face of the grandmother had many wrinkles. She had no teeth, and her clothes were simple. But her kindness and the love the child had for her were completely revealed by Jia Zheng's photo. Jia Zheng showed me a statue he had recently collected. It was an old woman holding a dead, middle-aged man. The old woman was a typical peasant, and her face had a mournful expression. He asked me to guess who this statue was of. I couldn't and did not know its origin. It was Michelangelo's masterpiece of Mary holding her son, the Pieta. The Pieta that we are familiar with shows a very young and beautiful Mary, and is the work of the young Michelangelo. But in his old age, he realized that when Jesus left this world, his mother was already an old woman in her 60s. Furthermore, Mary was born into poverty and spent her life in the countryside. She was an old peasant woman. Therefore, he carved a statue that was closer to the real Mary holding Jesus. The problem is that people are not willing to accept this statue because everyone only likes exterior beauty. The statue is in Firenze, but few tourists go to see it. In the past, I often visited cathedrals, both the solemn Gothic and the modern ones. I love both kinds. I've seen St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Santa Sofia in Istanbul. I've all along wanted to visit the Sistine Chapel because this is where Michelangelo's frescoes of the Last Judgment are. Recently, I finally had a chance to fulfill my wish and see the breathtaking frescoes in the Sistine Chapel. These frescoes, from an artistic perspective, are indeed magnificent works. But what I discovered was that it was not the artistic aspect that moved me so much. My heart had turned to Calcutta's Home for the Dying, a place Mother Teresa had prepared for poor people. There is no architectural beauty there, but there I can feel the best goodness of people. I will forever remember the pictures of those good-hearted volunteers holding poor people on the verge of death. These are the most beautiful pictures. And they made me think of the Last Judgment, because then Jesus will ask me, "Did you hold my hand when I needed you?" As I was walking out of the Sistine Chapel, I had a strange thought. If Michelangelo were to be reborn and once again did those huge frescoes, he probably would paint a simple picture of Mother Teresa holding the hand of a beggar. The wrinkles on Mother Teresa's face and the skinny beggar perhaps are not beautiful, but they can definitely move the inner depths of the heart of the observer and cause one to leave the Sistine Chapel filled with peace. What a shame that on our earth there is not a church with such a fresco. Thanks to little Wang, I no longer, as before, only pay attention to the exterior of things.